Welcome to our channel of terror and dread, where spine-chilling tales come to life. Brace yourselves, viewers, for you are about to embark on a journey of fear and suspense. We advise against watching alone, lest you risk the haunting shadows that may linger long after the screen fades to black. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Our stories, though true, have been cloaked in anonymity to protect the innocent. Get ready to uncover the mysteries that lurk beneath the surface of ordinary lives. Welcome to a realm where every breath could be your last. The Legend of Hillcrest Lane. The house on Hillcrest Lane had stood abandoned for over 50 years, a brooding sentinel over the small, sleepy town of Millhaven. Its dark windows were like empty eyes, watching silently as the years crept by. Rumors about the house were as old as it was, whispers of strange noises, mysterious lights, and eerie apparitions that could be glimpsed from the street on moonless nights. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the tragic history of the house. Edward Lancaster, the last known occupant, had moved in with his family in the early 20th century. The Lancasters were a well-to-do family, known for their generosity and social gatherings. However, their time in the house was short-lived. Within a year, the entire family had vanished without a trace. Some said they fled in the dead of night, driven mad by the spirits that inhabited the house. Others believed they were claimed by the entity that resided within. Whatever the truth, the house remained empty, a stark reminder of the town's dark past. Despite the warnings, it was a rite of passage for the children of Millhaven to dare each other to approach the old mansion, to press their noses against the cracked glass of the windows and peer inside. Few were brave enough to accept the challenge, and those who did returned with wild stories that only added to the house's legend. Most claimed to hear whispers or see fleeting shadows. Some even swore they saw faces staring back at them from the darkness within. Chapter 1. The Dare. The summer before high school, a group of friends, Jake, Mia, Sam, and Emily, found themselves with a lot of free time and a desire for adventure. They spent their days exploring the woods, swimming in the creek, and dreaming up new escapades. As the summer waned, Jake, the unofficial leader of the group, suggested they do something truly memorable. "How about we spend a night in the house on Hillcrest Lane?" he proposed one humid afternoon as they lounged by the creek. Emily's eyes widened. "Are you serious? No one's ever done that." "Exactly," Jake replied, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Think about it. We'll be legends." Mia, always the cautious one, frowned. "What if something happens? That place is falling apart." "Don't be a chicken," Sam teased, splashing water at her. "It's just an old house. What could possibly go wrong?" After some debate, they agreed. The plan was set. They would gather supplies and sneak out late Friday night. None of them mentioned the strange, uneasy feeling that settled over them as they made their preparations. Friday arrived, and the excitement was palpable. They packed their bags with flashlights, snacks, sleeping bags, and a couple of walkie-talkies. They told their parents they were having a sleepover at Jake's house, a cover that gave them enough time to carry out their plan undisturbed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Millhaven, the friends met at the edge of town. The sky was a deep indigo, stars beginning to twinkle faintly above. Jake, with his backpack slung over one shoulder, led the way. The streets were eerily quiet, and the further they walked, the more the tension seemed to mount. Hillcrest Lane was overgrown with weeds and wildflowers, the pavement cracked and uneven. The house loomed in the distance, a silhouette against the darkening sky. It seemed to beckon them forward, an ominous presence that both repelled and intrigued them. The air grew colder as they approached, a shiver running down Emily's spine. She glanced at her friends, seeing her own apprehension reflected in their faces. Yet, no one turned back. They were committed, driven by a mix of curiosity and the thrill of the unknown. The house was even more imposing up close. Its once grand facade was now a decaying ruin, vines creeping up its walls like skeletal fingers. The front door hung slightly ajar, creaking eerily in the breeze. Jake took a deep breath and pushed it open further, the sound echoing through the empty halls. "Ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. They nodded, though none of them felt ready. With a final look at each other, they stepped inside. Chapter 2. The Arrival. The interior was even worse than they had imagined. Dust and cobwebs covered every surface, and the air was thick with the musty smell of decay. Broken furniture was strewn about, and the wallpaper hung in tatters, peeling away from the walls like dead skin. "Let's find a place to set up," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "Maybe the living room?" They made their way through the dark, silent house, their flashlights casting long, flickering shadows. The floorboards creaked under their weight, each step a reminder of the house's fragile state. In the living room, they spread out their sleeping bags and settled in, trying to make themselves comfortable on the cold, hard floor. For a while, they talked and laughed, trying to ignore the oppressive atmosphere. They shared stories, some about the house and others from their own lives, using the familiarity to fend off the encroaching fear. But as the night wore on, a heavy silence fell over them. The house seemed to be listening, waiting. A sudden thump from upstairs made them all jump. "What was that?" Mia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Probably just the house settling," Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. Another thump, louder this time, echoed through the house. It was followed by a low, mournful wail that sent chills down their spines. "Maybe we should leave," Emily suggested, her voice trembling. "We can't leave now," Jake insisted. "We haven't even explored the place yet." Reluctantly, they agreed to stay, but no one felt brave enough to venture upstairs. Instead, they huddled together, listening to the strange noises that seemed to come from every corner of the house. As the night dragged on, exhaustion began to take its toll. Sam was the first to fall asleep, followed by Mia and Emily. Only Jake remained awake, his eyes scanning the dark room for any sign of movement. Just as he was about to drift off, he heard a soft rustling sound coming from the corner of the room. His heart pounding, he aimed his flashlight at the source of the noise. There, half hidden behind an old, moth-eaten curtain, was a small wooden door. "Hey, wake up!" Jake whispered, shaking his friends awake. "I found something." Groggily, they sat up, their curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Sam asked, rubbing his eyes. "A door," Jake said, pointing. "I think it leads to a basement." They gathered around the door, their flashlights illuminating its worn surface. Jake reached out and slowly turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. "Are we really doing this?" Mia asked, her voice shaking. "We've come this far," Jake said, though he felt a knot of fear in his stomach. "We have to see what's down there." With a deep breath, he led the way down the stairs, his friends close behind. The steps groaned under their weight, and the air grew colder the deeper they went. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room stood an old wooden chest. It was covered in dust, and strange symbols were carved into its surface. "What do you think is inside?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Only one way to find out," Jake said, though he hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside the chest was a collection of old, tattered books, a rusty dagger, and a small, intricately carved box. Jake picked up one of the books, its cover worn and faded. As he opened it, a strange, sickly sweet smell filled the air. "What is this?" Mia asked, peering over his shoulder. "It looks like some kind of journal," Jake said, flipping through the pages. "But I can't read the writing. It's in some weird language." As they examined the contents of the chest, The temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. A feeling of dread settled over them, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move. "We should go back upstairs," Emily said, her voice shaking. "I don't like it down here." Reluctantly, they agreed and made their way back up the stairs. But as they reached the top, they found the door had closed behind them. Jake pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. "We're trapped," Sam said, panic rising in his voice. "Calm down," Jake said, though he felt the same fear gripping his heart. "There's got to be another way out." They searched the basement, but there were no other doors or windows. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, and strange whispers filled the air. "Continue this narrative." "What's happening?" Mia cried, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," Jake said, his voice trembling. "But we have to stay calm. We'll find a way out." As they huddled together, the whispers grew louder, and the shadows seemed to close in around them. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Desperation gnawed at their minds, and they clung to each other, trying to fend off the growing terror. Chapter 3. The Whispers and the Shadows. The darkness in the basement felt alive, thickening with every passing moment. The friends huddled together, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. The whispers were now a constant murmur, unintelligible but filled with a malevolent intent that sent shivers down their spines. Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "We need to figure out what those symbols mean," he said, holding up the journal they had found. "Maybe there's something in here that can help us." Emily nodded, wiping away tears. "I remember reading about old languages in history class. Some of them use symbols like these. Maybe we can find a way to translate them." Mia, who had been silently clutching the carved box, opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in a velvet lining, was a small, ornate key. "Do you think this opens something in the house?" she asked. Sam, who had been pacing nervously, stopped and looked at the key. "It's worth a shot. There has to be a reason all this stuff was hidden away." Determined to find answers, they made their way back to the living room, the small key clutched tightly in Mia's hand. The house seemed to resist their movements, the walls closing in, the air growing colder. Each step felt like wading through molasses. Back in the living room, they examined the strange symbols again. Jake spread out the journal on the floor and they gathered around it, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the pages. Emily traced a finger over the symbols. "These look like some kind of runes. My grandmother used to have books about ancient languages. Some of these look familiar." Jake nodded, flipping through the journal. "If we can find out what these symbols mean, maybe we can find a way out of here." As they worked, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the house was aware of their efforts and was trying to stop them. Shadows danced on the walls and cold drafts swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights one by one. Panic set in as they were plunged into darkness. "We need light," Sam said, his voice shaking. "We can't see anything." Jake fumbled in his backpack and found a small battery-operated lantern. He switched it on, and the room was bathed in a soft yellow glow. The light flickered, but it held steady enough for them to continue their work. Emily's eyes widened as she deciphered part of the journal. "This passage talks about a binding ritual. It mentions the dagger and the symbols. I think it explains how to break the curse." "Can you read it?" Jake asked, leaning closer. "Some of it," Emily replied, squinting at the faded text. "It's saying something about using the key to unlock the true power of the dagger. We have to perform a ritual to set the spirits free." Mia's grip on the key tightened. "So this key, it unlocks something important?" Emily nodded. "Yes, but we need to find the right place. It mentions a hidden chamber beneath the house where the final ritual must be performed." Jake stood up, determination in his eyes. Then that's what we need to find, the hidden chamber. Chapter 4. The Hidden Chamber. The house groaned as they moved through it, the walls seeming to close in around them. Every corner they turned felt more oppressive than the last. Guided by Emily's translations, they searched for any sign of the hidden chamber. After what felt like hours, they found themselves back in the basement. The whispers were louder here, almost deafening. Emily pointed to a section of the wall where the symbols were faintly visible beneath layers of dust and grime. "Here," she said. "This has to be it." Jake examined the wall, feeling for any hidden mechanisms. As he pressed on one of the symbols, the wall shifted slightly. With a concerted effort, they managed to slide a section of the wall aside, revealing a narrow passageway leading down. Taking a deep breath, they descended into the darkness, the lantern flickering ominously. The air grew colder, and the whispers turned into wails of anguish, as if the spirits were aware of their impending release. At the end of the passageway, they entered a small circular chamber. The walls were covered in more symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, and on it lay a small, ornate lockbox. "This is it," Emily whispered. "The key must unlock this." Mia stepped forward, her hands trembling as she inserted the key into the lockbox. With a soft click, it opened, revealing a crystal vial filled with a dark, swirling liquid. Jake picked up the vial, his hand steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "This must be part of the ritual," he said. "We need to follow the instructions exactly." Emily read from the journal, her voice trembling. "We have to pour the liquid into the markings on the pedestal, then use the dagger to complete the ritual. It will release the spirits and break the curse." Sam took the dagger, its blade cold and gleaming in the lantern light. "Are we sure about this?" he asked, looking at his friends. "We don't have a choice," Jake said. "We need to end this, once and for all." With a deep breath, they began the ritual. Jake poured the liquid into the grooves of the pedestal, and the symbols flared to life, casting an eerie glow around the chamber. Sam stepped forward, the dagger poised above the markings. As he began to chant the incantation from the journal, the room trembled. The whispers turned into screams, and the air crackled with energy. Shadows writhed and twisted, and the temperature plummeted. With a final desperate cry, Sam plunged the dagger into the center of the pedestal. A blinding light filled the chamber, and the ground shook violently. The friends were thrown to the floor, the force of the ritual overwhelming them. Chapter 5. The Revelation. When the light finally faded, they found themselves lying on the cold stone floor, the room eerily silent. The oppressive feeling had lifted, replaced by a sense of calm. "Is it over?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake stood up, looking around the chamber. The symbols had stopped glowing, and the air was no longer cold. "I think we did it," he said, relief flooding his voice. As they made their way back up the narrow passage, they found the house had changed. The air was lighter, and the whispers had ceased. The sense of dread that had permeated the place was gone. In the living room, they gathered their things ready to leave the house behind. But as they reached the front door, they found it firmly shut, a new set of symbols etched into the wood. Emily examined the symbols, her brow furrowed. "These symbols, they're different. I think we need to perform one final task." "What now?" Sam groaned, exhaustion evident in his voice. Emily pointed to the journal. "There's one last passage. It talks about a final blessing to seal the house and protect it from future harm. We need to use the dagger and the vial one more time." Reluctantly, they prepared for the final ritual. Jake took the dagger, and Mia held the vial. As Emily read the incantation, they performed the blessing, sealing the house and ensuring that the spirits would never return. With the final words spoken, The symbols on the door glowed brightly before fading away. The door swung open, and they stepped outside into the fresh morning air. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. The sun was rising, casting a golden light over the town of Millhaven. The friends stood on the porch, the weight of the night's events settling over them. They had survived, but the experience had changed them. "Let's get out of here," Jake said, his voice filled with relief. "I never want to see this place again." They walked back to town, the first rays of sunlight warming their faces. The streets were quiet, the town still asleep, unaware of the ordeal the friends had just endured. Over the next few days, they tried to return to their normal lives, but the memories of the house lingered. They spoke little of what had happened, each of them dealing with the trauma in their own way. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in the fires of their shared experience. As weeks turned into months, the legend of the house on Hillcrest Lane faded, replaced by new stories and new adventures. But for Jake, Mia, Sam, and Emily, the memories would never truly fade. They knew that the evil they had faced was not unique, that there were other places, other houses, where malevolent spirits lay in wait. Yet they also knew that together they could face any darkness that came their way. For in the end, it was not the house or the spirits that defined them, but the strength of their friendship and the courage they had found within themselves. Epilogue. The echoes of the past years passed, and the friends grew up, moving on with their lives. They went to college, started careers, and built families. Yet the bond they had formed that fateful night remained unbroken. They kept in touch, meeting occasionally to reminisce about their shared past. One evening, as they gathered for a reunion, Mia brought out an old, dusty book she had found in her attic. It was similar to the journal they had burned, filled with strange symbols and ancient incantations. "Do you think there are more out there?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and fear. Jake looked at the book, then at his friends. "There probably are. This one looks a lot like the one we found in Hillcrest Lane." Mia nodded. "I found it while cleaning out my grandmother's attic. I thought it might be worth looking into." Sam examined the book, flipping through the pages. "It's definitely old, and these symbols, they look familiar." Emily leaned in, scrutinizing the text. "I think we should translate it, see if there's anything important. If there are other places like Hillcrest Lane, we need to be prepared." The friends agreed. They spent the next few days researching the symbols and translating the text. As they worked, they felt a sense of déjà vu, a reminder of the night that had changed their lives. The journal told the story of another haunted house, one that shared similarities with Hillcrest Lane. It spoke of restless spirits, dark rituals, and the power of friendship in overcoming evil. The more they read, the more they realized that their experience was part of a larger pattern. "We have to do something," Jake said, determination in his voice. "If there are other places like Hillcrest Lane, we need to help those who might be in danger." The friends nodded, their resolve strengthened by the discovery. They knew that their experience had prepared them for this. They had faced the darkness once and emerged victorious. They could do it again. Chapter 7. A New Mission. With their minds made up, they began their mission. They formed a group dedicated to investigating haunted locations and helping those affected by malevolent spirits. They called themselves the Guardians, a name that reflected their new purpose. Their first case took them to a small town a few hours away. Rumors had been circulating about a house on the outskirts of town that was said to be haunted. The stories were eerily similar to those of Hillcrest Lane, strange noises, shadowy figures, and a feeling of dread that permeated the area. As they approached the house, memories of Hillcrest Lane flooded back. The house was old and dilapidated, its windows dark and foreboding. The air was thick with tension, and the friends felt a familiar sense of unease. Ready? Jake asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his stomach. The others nodded, their faces determined. They had faced the darkness before, and they would do it again. They entered the house, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The interior was similar to Hillcrest Lane, dusty, cobweb-covered furniture, peeling wallpaper, and an overwhelming sense of malevolence. The air was cold, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. As they explored the house, they found more symbols carved into the walls, similar to those they had seen before. Emily examined them closely, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns. "These symbols are a binding spell," she said, her voice echoing in the silence. "Just like in Hillcrest Lane, we need to find the source and break the curse." They continued their search, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. In the basement, they found an old chest, similar to the one they had discovered years ago. Inside was another journal, a rusty dagger, and a small ornate box. "Here we go again," Sam said, a mix of fear and determination in his voice. They gathered the items and prepared to perform the ritual. The atmosphere grew more oppressive, the shadows deepening around them. As they followed the instructions in the journal, the air crackled with energy, and the house seemed to come alive. With a final desperate cry, they completed the ritual. The room was filled with a blinding light, and the ground shook violently. They were thrown to the floor, the force of the ritual overwhelming them. When the light finally faded, they found themselves lying on the cold stone floor, the room eerily silent. The oppressive feeling had lifted, replaced by a sense of calm. "Is it over?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake stood up, looking around the chamber. The symbols had stopped glowing, and the air was no longer cold. "I think we did it," he said, relief flooding his voice. Chapter 8. Expanding the team. Word of their success spread quickly. People from nearby towns reached out to them, seeking their help with haunted houses and restless spirits. The Guardians found themselves traveling across the country, using their knowledge and experience to confront the darkness wherever it appeared. As their reputation grew, they realized they couldn't do it alone. They began recruiting others who had experienced the supernatural and wanted to help. Their team expanded, bringing in people with different skills and backgrounds. Some were researchers, others were sensitives who could communicate with spirits, and a few were experienced in ancient rituals. One of their new recruits, a young woman named Lila, had grown up in a house haunted by a vengeful spirit. Her experiences had given her a deep understanding of the supernatural, and she quickly became an invaluable member of the team. With their expanded team, the Guardians tackled increasingly dangerous cases. They encountered malevolent entities, ancient curses, and spirits seeking revenge. Each case was a reminder of the night they had spent in Hillcrest Lane, and each success strengthened their resolve. Their work took them to an old asylum, abandoned for decades and said to be haunted by the spirits of former patients. The atmosphere was oppressive, and the whispers of the past echoed through the halls. As they explored the asylum, they found themselves facing an entity more powerful than any they had encountered before. The spirit was filled with rage and hatred, lashing out at anyone who entered its domain. The Guardians prepared for the confrontation, using everything they had learned over the years. The battle was intense, the spirit's fury manifesting in violent poltergeist activity. Furniture was thrown across rooms, walls shook, and the air grew thick with malevolence. In the end, their determination and unity prevailed. They completed the ritual, releasing the spirits trapped within the asylum and bringing peace to the tormented souls. The experience left them exhausted, but more committed than ever to their mission. Chapter 9. The Dark Revelation. Years into their mission, the Guardians stumbled upon a revelation that shook them to their core. While investigating an old library filled with occult books, they discovered a tome that detailed the origins of the malevolent spirits they had been fighting. The book spoke of an ancient order that had used dark magic to bind spirits to specific locations, creating prisons of torment. The order had long since vanished, but their curses remained, leaving a trail of haunted houses and restless spirits. Jake read the passage aloud, his voice trembling. This order, they were responsible for Hillcrest Lane and all the other places we've encountered. They used the spirits to gain power, trapping them in an endless cycle of suffering. Emily's eyes widened. So all this time we've been fighting the effects of their actions. We need to find a way to undo their work permanently. The revelation gave the Guardians a new purpose. They began researching the ancient order, seeking any information that could help them break the cycle of curses. They traveled to remote locations, consulted with experts in ancient magic, and delved into the darkest corners of the supernatural world. Their journey led them to a hidden monastery in the mountains, where a group of monks guarded a library filled with forbidden knowledge. The monks were wary of outsiders, but after hearing the Guardian's story, they agreed to help. In the monastery's library, they found a manuscript detailing a ritual to undo the work of the ancient order. The ritual was complex and dangerous, requiring immense power and precise execution. "We have to try," Jake said, determination in his voice. "This could be our chance to end the cycle of curses once and for all." The monks warned them of the risks, but the Guardians were resolute. They prepared for the ritual, gathering the necessary items and honing their skills. The night of the ritual, the air was thick with tension, and the weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders. As they began the ritual, the ground trembled and the air crackled with energy. Shadows writhed and twisted, and the spirits of the cursed locations seemed to converge upon them, their anguish palpable. The ritual was intense, the power required pushing them to their limits. But the Guardians' determination and unity held strong. With a final desperate effort, they completed the ritual, the energy surging through them and into the ground. A blinding light filled the monastery, and the air was filled with the sound of shattering chains. The spirits were released, their torment ended, and the curses lifted. Chapter 10. The Legacy. In the aftermath of the ritual, the Guardians felt a profound sense of relief. They had achieved what they set out to do, breaking the cycle of curses and freeing countless spirits from their torment. Their mission was far from over, but they knew they had made a significant impact. They continued their work, helping those affected by the supernatural and ensuring that the knowledge of the ancient order's dark deeds was not forgotten. As they traveled, they shared their story, spreading awareness and encouraging others to stand against the darkness. They formed alliances with other groups dedicated to the supernatural, creating a network of support and knowledge. Years passed, and the Guardians became legends in their own right. They trained new members, passing on their knowledge and experience. The team grew, and their mission expanded, but the core values of unity, courage, and friendship remained unchanged. One day, while attending a conference on the supernatural, Jake, Emily, Mia, and Sam found themselves reflecting on their journey. They had started as a group of friends seeking answers and had become a force for good in a world filled with darkness. "Remember when we first found that journal?" Mia said, a smile playing on her lips. "We had no idea what we were getting into." Sam chuckled. "Yeah, we were just a bunch of scared kids, but look at us now." Emily nodded. "We've come a long way, and we've made a real difference." Jake raised his glass in a toast. "To the Guardians, and to all the friends we've made along the way, may we continue to fight the darkness and protect the innocent." They clinked their glasses, the bond between them stronger than ever. They knew their work was far from over, but they also knew they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Epilogue. The Next Generation. As the Guardians grew older, they began to think about the future. They knew that their mission could not end with them. that the fight against the supernatural would continue long after they were gone. They started a training academy dedicated to educating and preparing the next generation of supernatural investigators. The academy attracted students from all over the world, each with their own experiences and reasons for joining. They were taught everything the Guardians had learned, from ancient rituals to modern investigative techniques. The legacy of the Guardians was passed on, ensuring that the fight against the darkness would continue. Among the first graduates was a young woman named Lily, who had been haunted by spirits since childhood. Her determination and bravery reminded Jake of his younger self, and he took her under his wing. With her passion and skills, Lily quickly became a leader among the new recruits. One evening, as the sun set over the academy, Lily approached Jake. "Do you think we'll ever truly be free of the darkness?" she asked, her eyes reflecting both hope and doubt. Jake smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "As long as there are people like us willing to stand against it, the darkness will never win. It's a constant battle, but it's one worth fighting." Lily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of purpose and determination. "Then we'll keep fighting," she said, her voice firm. "For as long as it takes." And so the story of the Guardians continued, their legacy living on through those they had inspired. The fight against the supernatural was endless, but with each generation the light grew stronger, pushing back the darkness. The Guardians had started as a group of friends facing an unimaginable terror, but they had become something greater. They were a beacon of hope in a world of shadows, a reminder that even in the darkest times, courage, unity, and friendship could prevail. As long as there were those willing to stand against the darkness, the legacy of the Guardians would endure, lighting the way for all who followed.